תודה רבה לחברים בפאנל. ב-30 השנים האחרונות, מאז הסכמי אוסלו, פעלו גורמים שונים לקבע ולהשריש את התפיסה כאילו אין כל פתרון אחר או אפשרות אחרת מלבד הקמה של מדינה ערבית ביהודה ושומרון. לעומת ניסיונות אלו, הועלו בשנים האחרונות גם הצעות שונות להחלת ריבונות ישראלית על חלקים מיהודה ושומרון. אבל בכל פעם שנושא הריבונות עולה על הפרק, מנסים מתנגדיו להציג אותו כהזוי, בלתי מחובר למציאות ובלתי אפשרי, תוך יצירת מנגנוני הפחדה שירתיעו את הציבור הישראלי מלבחון באמת ולעומק את הסוגיה. טענות כי ריבונות ישראלית תהווה הפרה של החוק הבינלאומי שאוסר סיפוח של שטחים, אחרים שצועקים שזה מה שיקים לנו כאן, מדינת אפרטהייד, או שמהלך כזה לא יתקבל בעולם ויפגע ביחסינו עם ארצות הברית. שאלות אלו מתחדדות עוד יותר כעת משאנו נמצאים ימים ספורים לפני הבחירות בארצות הברית. תוצאות הבחירות עתידות להשפיע בצורה משמעותית על יחסו של הממשל האמריקני לאזור כולו וליוזמות מדיניות בפרט. בפאנל הבא נתייחס לשאלות האלו ואחרות, אז אני מתכבדת להזמין את חברי הפאנל שלום עכשיו, החלת ריבונות בראי המשפט הבינלאומי והבחירות בארצות הברית. הפאנל יתקיים באנגלית. מנחה הפאנל, מר דניאל כהן, עיתונאי זוכה 3 פרסי אמי, עד לאחרונה נציג רשת ניוזמקס בישראל, וכיום בעל תוכנית ברשת Real Life Network. חברי הפאנל, עורכת הדין ניצנה דרשן-לייטנר, יושבת ראש ארגון שורת הדין, הגברת קרולין גליק, עיתונאית וסופרת, דוקטור עופר זלצברג, מומחה למדיניות חוץ, ודוקטור רן ברץ, פובליציסט ומרצה וראש מערך ההסברה לשעבר במשרד ראש הממשלה.
Hi everyone, Shalom lekulam. Glad to be here with you. My name is Daniel. Thank you for that warm welcome introduction. I always feel like it's a good idea to help the ladies up the steps because if they fall, I'll fall with you, so it's okay, right? Thanks everybody. Let's dive right in. The introductions were wonderful. Caroline, good to see you again. I've interviewed you before many times. ניצנה, I think I really respect and admire your work. You're fantastic. And I'm really excited to see. Is Ron here, by the way? Ron? No. Okay, well, fair. And a pleasure to see you and to be here with you as well. We're going to dive right in. We have 40 minutes, and so we'll try to keep to the time. Caroline, start with you, okay? Many people in the United States, many people around the world have been saying that the election that we are just literally over a week away from now is, people have been saying, oh, every election, oh, this is the most important. This literally may be for Israel the most important election in history, right? You've been saying for some time that victory for Israel is more important than having the support of the United States, and that the Biden White House is not really an ally of Israel. You've said that, in fact, it's the greatest obstacle to Israeli victory. So first question to you, Caroline, and then everybody, by the way, jump in, okay? You don't have to wait for me to tag you in, but what role does American public opinion play, and what role should it play in shaping U.S. policy on Israeli sovereignty? Caroline.
Well, thanks so much for that question. It's broad, so I'm just going to try to bear down a little bit. U.S. public opinion is critical because today the Biden administration is advancing a policy objective of reigning in Israel and preserving the strategic reality as it stood in the region on October 6, 2023, through ceasefires, through blocking Israel from strategically defeating its enemies, starting with Iran and throughout its proxies in Lebanon and Gaza and Yemen and so on and so forth. So the question really is, can it, but not the question, the point is that it can't do this openly. You can't say, look, what we really want to do is block Israel from winning, and that's what we're doing. Instead, they talk about a ceasefire. We need to get to a ceasefire. They insinuate that Israel is wantonly murdering Gazans without actually saying it. So And why is that? It's because what we saw in successive monthly polls by the Harvard-Harris Polling Institute is that some 80% of Americans support Israel across the board, support all of Israel's war goals, oppose the criminalization of Israel, do not believe that Israel is conducting itself in any way that's untoward, certainly not criminal. And so when an administration is pushing a policy that's opposed by the vast majority of Americans, they're going to do it through a strategy of gaslighting, which is what we've seen for the past year. So public opinion here is very important, and I'll just give you an example. So Hassan Nasrallah was a strategic target. His death, his elimination by Israel last month was a strategic achievement by Israel. It fundamentally changed the nature of Hezbollah's options by, taking away the man who had been leading it for, since I think since the 1990s. And so the Americans opposed this. They did not want Israel to take out Nasrallah, but they couldn't oppose it after it was done because he has rivers of American blood on his hands. So because the American people overwhelmingly viewed Hassan Nasrallah as an American enemy, the administration could not condemn Israel's operation, even though they completely opposed it. So here what you see, and one last point on that, the other tension between the American policy is not just public opinion, it's also American national security interests. So if you're pushing a policy goal, which is not only antithetical to the views of 80% of the American people, but also antithetical to America's national interests by undermining, by defeating terrorist organizations and leaders, then you can't openly advance it. So here, by choosing targets that are viewed by the American people as legitimate and viewed by the Pentagon as important, Israel is able to bob and wade in this sort of morass of American hostility in a manner that allows us not only to succeed tactically, but also strategically. Obviously, Rafah is another example of that.
Ophir, just popcorn right over to you. No long question. How important is American public opinion as it pertains to Israel?
I think it's extremely important, and especially in the sense that it is so polarized. The war underlines the degree to which we are, and it's unpleasant to say, we are dependent on U.S. support. We see this in Iron Dome, we see this in tunnel detection technology, we see this in anti-drone capabilities, we see this in anti-missile technologies, we see this in the very generous U.S. assistance during this war. And it all becomes very concrete in such times. And the public opinion is very important because it is only polarizing. Back in the 80s we saw, and this has nothing to do with us, Americans are polarized. Back in the 80s we saw much more bipartisanship. Today finding bipartisanship is extremely difficult. And we want Israel to remain a bipartisan issue because we depend on US support. And I think the current war also shows that those of us who hoped it will be possible to dilute our reliance on the US thanks to Chinese or Russian or whatever support, we see how hostile they are to us now. So I think it's extremely important, in this case agree very much with Caroline, that public opinion is very important, and we need to find a way to engage with all parts of it.
ניצנה, same question.
I'm not sure that we should consider the public opinion in the United States. We should take into consideration the position of the American government. The subject of this conference is applying sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And if we want to do that, if we want to apply sovereignty on Judea and Samaria, we should not consider the opinion of the American public as much as we need to consider the approach of the American administration. For the reason that everybody wants to, at least the people in this room want to apply sovereignty on Judea and Samaria. I want to apply sovereignty on Judea and Samaria, but it's a problem because it contradicts the international law. And when it comes to contradicting the international law, the one that will stand next to us and protect us is no other than the American president. And I will just elaborate on it just for 1 second. Applying sovereignty on Judea and Samaria is basically building more settlements, building the entire region under the Israeli law. Now, Israel is already under investigation in the international criminal law for building settlements in Judea and Samaria. The investigation started in 2019, and we don't know the situation right now, but it's ongoing. So if we apply sovereignty, we really expedite this investigation, which might result in issuing arrest warrants against Israeli officials. Now, it's not a joke. Issuing arrest warrants in the International Criminal Court might bring arrests of Israeli officials. 128 countries are members in the International Court. They will have to respect, to honor any arrest warrant issued against Israeli officials. It will be a game changer. It will be a nightmare. It will be a disaster. The one that can block it is the United States, not the public, but the president.
ניצנה,
And if we go, just for the other part,
Yeah.
if we go to the matter of applying sovereignty, it's not only a war crime because of the settlement, it's also apartheid state. And apartheid state, again, it's a crime against humanity. Israel will be charged for international crime in the International Criminal Court and also in the International Court of Justice, which will bring resolutions in the Security Council. And the one that can block any condemnation against Israel or any resolution in the Security Council is the American president. This is why we have to take his opinion into consideration, not as much as the American public.
Thank you. ניצנה, Ron, I'd like to bring you into the conversation in a moment, but Caroline, I heard you say you thought that was actually wrong, what ניצנה said, or you disagreed with which part, quickly?
So very quickly, I wrote a book called The One-State Solution, or The Israeli Solution, a One-State Plan for Peace in the Middle East, back 11 years ago. And I spent an enormous amount of time researching and then publishing my findings in relation to international law. And I think, with all due respect, ניצנה, you're confusing between international law and international organizations. They're two very distinct and separate things. From a raw international law perspective, Israel has the right to apply its sovereignty to Judea and Samaria in furtherance of the doctrine of uti posititas juris, which means that as you rule, which because Judea and Samaria was part of British mandatory Palestine, it automatically redounds to the sovereignty of the repository of that mandate, which is the State of Israel. But be that as it may, I think you've confused between lawfare and international law. It is true that Israel is being criminalized unlawfully, I would argue, in the ICC, of which, of course, we're not a member, and they don't actually have jurisdiction over us, and also in the International Court of Justice at The Hague. And they are, in fact, in all likelihood, going to issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant as a first sort of shot across the bow, because they want to go after our military officials as well. So I think that these things are already happening, regardless of what we do in Judea and Samaria, which is why American public opinion is so important, because if you want to start moving the ship of state, if you want to start moving if you want to build the possibility of abandoning the failed and dangerous, and I would argue an existential threat to Israel, concept of the establishment of a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River, and introducing and rendering acceptable and in fact viewed as inevitable the application of Israeli law to Judea and Samaria, you have to make your case. You have to constantly make your case to American public, because it's the American public that at the end of the day determines how policymakers are going to be looking at this. We already see the discourse massively shifted among the GOP in the Republican Party just since 2007, and I think that you're going to see more and more of it. The longer, the louder Israel discusses this and views it as a legitimate possibility and policy, you're going to see more and more American support for that, and that is going to dictate the policy of any administration going forward. So I think it's very important to make those distinguishing characters.
ניצנה,
The problem with this approach, Caroline,
just quickly, please. We haven't heard from Ron yet.
Is that nobody accepts the fact that Israel owns these territories. Israel has a right to these territories. It's zchut avot, it's a patriarch land. No tribunal in the world recognizes these territories as belong to Israel. The opposite. Every tribunal, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the Security Council, the General Assembly of the UN, United States government especially, recognize these territories as occupied territories, and therefore it's a war crime. Whether I like it, I don't like it, but this is a fact. And you cannot ignore the fact.
Again, this is a political, not legal distinction, ניצנה, that you're making. You're following politics and asserting that it's law, but it's not. And in that way, it's a very dangerous thing that you're doing, because you have to make the distinction between actual international law and lawfare. And you're the best at that in the business. It is lawfare.
It's not lawfare. Section 49 to the Geneva Convention prohibits any occupying country to move its population into the occupied land that they
forcibly move populations. That's not what the settlements are about, and you know that as well as everybody else.
Can we bring Ron in? Hi, Ron. Sorry. Would you like to weigh in on that, or I have some other topics we can ping?
I think we should go.
Let's move ahead. Got it. You know, there have been so many.
I was going to react to the bipartisanship.
Go ahead.
Agenda.
Please. If the conversations, let's keep the conversation hot instead of starting fresh somewhere else. Go ahead.
So I think I have a little bit of, glim news. Bipartisanship is dead. It's dead not because of us, it's dead because of internal processes in American politics. Right now, Republicans and Democrats, each side looks at the elections, believing that if the other side wins, it's the end of America. Okay, so where are the shared values between those two sides? And especially when it comes to Israel, if you look at public opinion polls, you see that the Democrats have been continuously, the dislike to Israel has been growing continuously and steadily. And so what happens if you say I'm bipartisan, Republicans say, but the Democrats basically hate you, so why do you go there? We are your friends. Instead of treating us as friends, you're treating your enemies as friends, right? Politically, not enemies in a real sense. So by attempting to keep the old, obsolete bipartisanship agenda alive, we're actually losing support in the United States, because the Democrats will continue disliking us more and more, but the Republicans don't understand what we are doing and what we are saying. We share values, to sum this up, much more as time grows with the Republicans.
You think the Republicans don't understand? The Democrats largely have been the party pushing the two-state solution. The Republicans have been saying, Israel, do what you need to do, we support you. I think that's a fair statement. What do you think needs to change in the way of thinking? Everybody around the world seems to have their idea for what peace here and what that solution should look like, instead of saying, Israel, you decide, you should be the ones in control. And then after you're done, maybe Ofer, you can weigh in as well, please.
So we'll see what the next administration, hopefully Republican, will have to say. I think this is a little bit where we left off, right, 4 years ago. We didn't initiate enough during the Trump administration, and when we tried, we were blocked by a few guys in Trump's own cadre. But we can do much more if Trump wins, I think. A lot of that because he will not have a lot of interest here, and he will let us do much more than we previously did. Meaning, if you ask me, I don't think we should annex territories. Definitely not if he's opposed to that, as he was during his. But we can do much more on the ground. We are losing the battle of sovereignty on the ground, not in the courts, on the ground, and this is due to our own timid policies. If we will be braver in applying our sovereignty, even in sea areas, we are losing sea areas, which according to, then we will be in a much stronger position, whatever comes, whatever solution comes, and whatever solution comes, we already know that the Palestinians will reject it, right? So what happens on the ground is much more important, and I think Trump, and this is a major difference between Republican and Democratic administrations, Trump would let us do more on the ground, while the Democrats have their surveillance over every hut in Judea and Samaria and over every illegal Palestinian hut that we rightfully destroy.
Yeah. We have just under 10 minutes left. Boy, that went fast. Fair. Why don't you, if you want to respond to that, and then I want to go through some rapid fire, not so long questions, answers, okay? Go ahead, Ofer. Yeah, here.
Yeah, sorry. Very briefly, I think we agree. Certain steps, bipartisanship may be dead. By the way, it may come back to life, but it will not be thanks to us or because of us. It has nothing to do with us. As long as that's the case, and given how polarized the US is, and given how dependent we are on this, there are certain steps we shouldn't take, even though we want to take them, even though we have the right to take them, even though whatever it is. And I think very tangibly what it means, it's not only what we avoid, it's what we do. Knesset member Ohad Tal here, I think, is an example of how to engage with both political parties in the US, that it is possible, doable, and desirable. And I don't think we should accelerate this death of bipartisanship, and we should try as much as possible to stay out of this mess. I think that this is precisely the case, and this is why this conference is so important, because there is today no leader of an Israeli faction in the Knesset, to the best of my knowledge, who says, let's go back and do final status negotiations, 2 states, and so on. There is also no one who says, let's go back to do conflict management like we did until October 6. We need something new. And to devise this thing together with allies, but divided as they may be, is extremely important.
Sorry, we're going to share a mic for a moment. Okay, some rapid fires while we have a few minutes left and maybe 1 minute each. Talk to me about what a Trump election means for the Israeli-U.S. relationship and what a Kamala Harris presidency would mean for a U.S. and Israeli relationship. If you can keep it to 1 minute each, please.
So I think what we're seeing with the United States in a bipartisan way is that there's less and less interest in having American forces deployed to the Middle East. And when you look at the disparity between the two parties, it isn't over whether the United States wants to go and slay dragons in the Middle East or not. They don't. But on the Democratic side, they have this concept that the answer is to empower Iran as sort of a balance, to balance America's allies, to basically harm America's allies, to empower Iran and reach some sort of balance of forces between the two, thinking that that's going to be the key for America to disengage from the Middle East. It's an insane concept. It's evil, in my opinion, but that is the concept that the Democrats have been pursuing since Obama's presidency. On the Republican side, what you're seeing is a Trump doctrine, as it played out in his first term, was to empower America's allies to stand up to common foes in order to allow the United States to disengage from the Middle East effectively. So that what you're going to see with the Trump administration, in contrast to what we've seen for the past 4 years with Biden, is that the United States, rather than threaten us with arms embargoes if we go forward towards achieving strategic victory, is going to provide us with what we need in order to achieve that aim, which they view as a common goal that, again, allows them to reduce the American footprint in the Middle East. From their perspective, the more powerful and successful Israel is, the safer America is, and the easier it is for the United States to direct its forces towards the Far East, towards China, which is where they want to focus.
Oh, fair.
Thank you. I think arguably Trump is looking primarily for stability and prosperity. Harris is looking also for stability, but also for advancing certain values. I want to elaborate actually through Trump on stability. Stability means no dramatic policy steps that may create crisis, that may hamper how markets work. And on prosperity, I think he, like a new democratic administration, is quite keen to broker a Saudi-American and Saudi-Israeli relationship. And that might not fit very well with annexation. I think he's also cautious, this was discussed in the previous panel, about causing harm to an asset he helped establish, the Abraham Accords, and that there would be a setback to that. I think both candidates are likely to be open, if it's done well, to advancing an Abrahamic discourse relative to the connection of both peoples, also Jewish people, to all of the land from the river to the sea, as descendants of Abraham who are in our homeland. And I think that this is a very important entry point looking ahead.
ניצנה.
I believe President Trump if we want any opportunity, if we want to do something with the territories, with Judea and Samaria, there won't be another chance but President Trump to approve such a step. You need a president that abandoned the two-state solution, as Trump did very quickly after he started his past term. You need a president that believes that Israel has a right to territories that they took over after 1967, like Ramat Golan, which President Trump recognized, getting near to East Jerusalem by moving the embassy to West Jerusalem, and allowing an opportunity for Israel to apply sovereignty according to the Abraham Accords if they were going forward and complete the way he proposed it. So with President Trump, Israel can accomplish much more than if Kamala Harris will win. My fear is for the short term. My fear is that Kamala Harris will push Israel into a settlement in this current war, which will let Israel lose all the assets that they gained during the war. And therefore, I really want a strong president that will stand to the side of Israel, that will understand that Israel is fighting for its survival. And it's not fighting only Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, but the evil states that are fighting not only Israel, but the entire West. And I believe that President Trump has such a vision.
So we must recognize that there is an isolationist strain in the Republican Party that has grown in the last few years. Many Republicans are also tired of overseas involvement and, even just supporting financially, like Ukraine and even Israel. You hear that here and there from Republicans as well. So I don't think Trump is going to go all in supporting Israel, lending us whatever we need, etc. I think Trump is important on four fronts. One, he will be much more tolerant to our waging war against the Iranian proxies that we have here, Hamas and Hezbollah. It will allow us to go further. It will allow us to gain more in that war. Second, it will be much tougher on Iran, which is, of course, existentially important to us. Three, he will be much more helpful in the international arena, international institutions like the UN and the Security Council, which is also crucial. On all those three fronts, I think Harris will be a disaster. I think Biden was worse than Obama, and she'll be much worse than Biden. And it's not a personal question. You just look at the staff that they have. She has a younger staff, much more militant, much more anti-Israeli, and they are going to determine their attitude towards. So it's not a question of direct support to Israel, just allowing us to achieve more and protecting us in the international arena and reestablishing the sanctions on Iran, etc. All those things will be very beneficial and dramatically distinct between the two administrations.
Great answer. We have 1 minute left, and I'd like to ask on behalf of, I know a lot of people are watching on Facebook, a lot of people are watching on YouTube, and even since we're talking about as an Israeli and American relationship relates, so we'll have to keep our answers brief. My question is this: not the White House, not lawmakers in Washington, D.C., not the elected bodies, but how can the American people be more supportive of the Israeli people? And we'll leave it at that. Let's keep it short because we're out of time.
I think that it's very important for the American people to obviously vote for the candidate they believe is going to be most supportive of America, and I believe that the candidate that's going to be standing for rebuilding American strength at home and abroad is likely also going to be a candidate that's going to be supportive of standing with America's allies, first and foremost Israel. Aside from that, I think it's very important for them to pray for us. I think we feel their prayers. I think it's important for American Jews not only to stand with us, but to realize that by standing with them, they're protecting themselves. They're protecting their civil rights as American citizens. So I think all those things are extremely important.
To
two things. One is to continue with U.S. support for Israel relative, especially to Iran, is extremely important. And I think both Trump and Harris are on the record talking about a new deal with Iran. And we don't know what it will be. And there is a risk there. And second, I think that American society and Israeli society are going in different, sometimes opposite directions. Our society is becoming more religious, more conservative, in some ways more inward-looking. Their society is becoming, and you mentioned, I think, generationally, becoming more liberal, more progressive, more universalist. And if they want to support Israel, I would suggest that they would find someone in the camp they feel less close to in Israel and engage with them in conversation. I think it's very important for them to be in touch with our new elites, our new whatever it is, and not to hope for Israeli society to go back to what it was in the 90s or 80s or whatever it is, to engage with real Israelis, to listen, for us to listen to them.
American public should be standing to the side of Israel no matter what it is, no matter if Netanyahu is a prime minister or Lapid or other or Gantz. No political dispute should be the one that will split the American public. Israel is fighting for its survival, and the American public, which was all the time a very good ally of the Jewish people, of the people in Israel, must stand with Israel, should donate, should contribute, should share, should come here, should support, should stand against any administration, whether it will be Trump or Harris, that will try to obstruct Israel's efforts to win this war or any coming war. This is what the American public should do.
Amen. Yes.
I have a very short answer. Whether it's for your governor, your senator, your congressman, or your president, just two words: vote Republican.
Let's leave it with this. We leave it with this, 30 more seconds. This is a spiritual war, Carolina, and that's what I believe. And I know everybody wants to hear from you and not from me here, but for anybody who's watching, you know, there is a practical reason to support Israel, and that is it's the tip of the spear, fighting terror. But there are biblical reasons as well. Genesis 12:3 says, God says, I'll bless those who bless Israel. I'll curse those who curse it. So and there's a commanded blessing in that. So we want to be a part of that blessing. Psalm 122:6 says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So wherever you are watching, thank you for listening. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and thank you for supporting Israel. Thank you all panelists. We appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening. Thanks.
Thank you so much. תודה רבה לחברי הפאנל.